everybody comes to the area of Africa where they have resources. You remember the history of Belgian Congo. Why did the Belgian government, King Leopold, come to the Congo? Because of the natural resources, to tap it. So they will come there with everything they have, and whatever it takes, whether you're going to kill off half of the population to get the resources. So the countries in Africa that have natural resources become attraction for international involvement, and the place becomes like a war zone because there's a lot of competition to get the resources. That's part of the problem.
Okay. So
that they now pit person against person, group against group, while they are trying to get the resources. And so this is the problem. That's why we say it's some form of curse.
If I'm hearing you correctly, the international community is also to blame for the crisis.
Oh, they have
in
a
Africa.
lot. Look, the problem we have, if you take Nigeria, the problem we have right now, you hear some people in the southeast saying they want to separate from the country. You have some youths in the north saying, Igbos get out of our state, of our region. The problem is the colonial structure that we inherited. A great deal of us in Africa. We have to deal with that. It is time for African countries that claim to be independent to begin to think independently and plan. Use what you have now and revise it, review it, take a look at it again and say, look, this was not created by God. The British or the French or whatever, the Portuguese came, created these countries and put this boundary here and put this boundary there, and they're part of the problem. You have to reorganize. You have to be truly independent, and then we begin to look at what we have. And we have to look at our laws. How can you have mineral resources? God has given you all these resources, and you say that only the federal government can tap it. And the federal government cannot even take care of half of what it has to take care of. And instead of allowing the states to have autonomy, as you have, if you had this kind of situation in the U.S., there'll be chaos. You know how they manage the economy in the U.S.?
Each state.
The natural resources that you have in your state belongs to not only the state, it belongs to you. If you find oil in your backyard, in America, that oil belongs to you. You have guidelines from the government to tell you how to handle it. And, by the way, not the federal government. It is the state. The state must be given enough autonomy to control its natural resources, its human resources, its own security. Otherwise, there'll be no peace, because that's not right. And if there's no peace, there's no progress.
You think that can work here?
It will work. It's the only thing that can work. If you, look, some people in Biafra, Southeast are saying they want to be on their own. South is complaining that, look, you are feeding off our resource and we are suffering, which is true. The only way to address this is to give every region, every district its own autonomy to a great extent. It doesn't mean that America, South Carolina, a small state like South Carolina, I was reading it the other day, man, I nearly burst into tears out of envy. 51,000 companies doing business directly with China from one state, bringing in over $65 billion into their state every year because they can do it by law. They can take care of their business. They're not waiting for Washington. Can you imagine? Look at what was happening in Washington. You wait for Washington to develop your state, you go bankrupt. Nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the only way. After all, we say we are practicing federalism. We borrowed it from the United States. And we are not practicing economic federalism. And without economics, what are you? I mean, tell me, what do you have? There's nothing.
Well, it definitely has to be naturalized. But I'm hearing several things, from what you're saying. First of all, it does seem to be easier, trading with countries coming from outside of Africa than within Africa. That's something that ECOWAS has been working on, and it hasn't worked even till now. We're still in progress, the integration of Africa. And I think that it probably be, could this be deliberate? The fact that Africa is still unable to trade within itself, benefit from its own resources, benefit from its own trade, and deploy that back into development.
Charity begins at home. If one country is not even a country yet, and you say you want to reconcile the whole of Africa, when each country in Africa is not even sure whether it is a country. That's the problem we have. Before you can reconcile Africa, you must first take care of each country.
Our interview with Dr. Pearse continues after the break. And now for other discussions in diplomatic circles. China has promised to help Pakistan and Afghanistan to improve relations and establish a crisis prevention and management mechanism. During a news conference in Pakistani capital Islamabad, Pakistan's top foreign policy advisor, Sartaj Aziz, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, spoke about the need for improved relations between the two neighbors. Afghanistan and Pakistan have been uneasy neighbors since Pakistan's independence in 1947. Their ties have been poisoned in recent years by Afghan accusations that Pakistan is supporting Taliban insurgents fighting the US-backed Kabul in order to limit the influence of its old rival, India, in Afghanistan. Turkish President Recep Erdogan has condemned recent demands by Saudi Arabia and 3 other Gulf Arab countries for their demands on Qatar in order to lift sanctions. President Erdogan described the demands as unlawful. Conservative Arab peers have been incensed over Qatar's alleged support for Islamists they regard as threats to their dynastic rule. But on Sunday, President Erdogan dismissed calls for Turkey to close a military base in the tiny state. Turkey is the most powerful regional country to stand by Qatar and has sent 100 cargo planes with supplies since its neighbors cut air and sea links. Both Qatar and Turkey have backed the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt before it was overthrown in 2013.